Welcome to another edition of Eye on Sullivan. I'm your host, Mike McGuire, joined today, as we are each week, by the chairman, Rob Doherty. Rob, it's still raining.
It is still raining. We've been talking about rain. We have not had a non-rainy weekend since November.
That's it's unbelievable, but it is true, and any of us that are involved in outdoor activities know that to be the absolute fact.
Yeah, so I invested a lot of money down in the patio down at the diner in Wurtsboro, and we have not used it one day yet.
Well, folks, to our audience, the Wurtsboro Diner is definitely the place to be. You know, we all go back to Blanche's and how, forget about the legislative room in the government center, forget about any other place. That was, if you were not in at Blanche's, you were out politically.
Correct. That is correct.
And while the Wurtsboro Diner has a great menu and it's certainly not politically centered, the Wurtsboro Diner, folks, if you haven't been down there, it is terrific. Rob and his family have done some great work down there. The menu has been enhanced. The new patio is going to be great. If the rain ever stops,
if it ever stops,
it's going to be terrific. If not, it'll be waterfront.
There you go.
So, had a great weekend last weekend. My son won 2 national titles.
Well, that's nice.
In motorcycle racing.
Okay.
The rain stopped just long enough for him to beat a former pro motocrosser.
Wow.
So, he did a great job. He's coming along terrific under the tutelage of the GOAT from Jeffersonville, Andy Caradontis.
Who is the best of the best.
He's the best of the best. He won 6 national titles last weekend.
He's the best
up in Binghamton. He is the best of the best, and grows flowers during the week and mows them down on the weekend. So, well, we are 1 week out from the primaries.
Correct.
And to say things are getting a little bit hot is to say that there's a minor disagreement going on between Israel and Iran right now.
Well, as you know, I'm a fan of primaries. Mm-hmm. I think that, you get to talk about issues. Mm-hmm. You get to lay issues out. You get to show how you would run, especially if you're the challenger, you get to lay out your platform on how you would run the department or the office. We didn't get that this election. Tim Diamond, who I think is a capable person, has not put forth a platform. So that's a little troublesome for me. I think that...
Well, the platform is it's time for a change.
Yeah.
Not sure why.
Well,
the 23 Yankees never said it was time for a change.
They did not. I think that... I think this primary has gone awry. It's the worst case scenario where you have one side just absolutely slandering the other side. And Mr. Diamond's not doing the slandering, but it's the people that he allows to go out there and say stuff that, frankly, is just not true.
Well, it's his surrogates. And again,
correct.
We here at Eye on Sullivan, we don't endorse anybody.
Nope.
We support. We encourage everyone to get out and vote, to get the best person to do the job.
And I encourage everyone to go out and do their homework.
Correct.
Okay? And, look into everyone. I made a post the other day on a Facebook site. And, if Mr. Diamond gets in, he's going to bring in a whole new management team. That's the way it works.
Sure.
Okay? There's ups and downs with that. There's growing pains with that. You think you know how to run something. When you get in there, you find out real fast it's not how you thought it was.
It's a vast agency.
Correct.
With lots of different moving parts. And once you get in there, you may have been a great street cop, a detective. You may have done a lot of work with drugs. But while you were focusing on drugs, you weren't running a jail, running a civil division,
correct,
managing several hundred employees.
Correct. It's a lot. And I talk about that, and he's never run a jail before. And Hal Smith, who runs the jail currently, I believe in this county is the best person for that job. But he would probably be relieved of his duties, I imagine.
Well, I would imagine he would. And there's a guy that literally grew up running that, being in that jail.
I mean, so we negotiated the current contract
right.
for the COs with him, and we sat down in a room with him, and I've never really engaged Hal in how jails work or the contract or anything. He sits down, he reaches in his back pocket, he takes out 6 folded up pieces of loose leaf.
Yep.
And man, let me tell you something. The contract was settled a day later.
Well,
okay?
and it was the minutia that he knows.
Oh, backwards and forwards. It was impressive. I have to tell you.
He could quote page numbers and paragraph numbers in a 30-page contract.
It was impressive. And that's the other thing is that, people are like, well, Tim negotiated this contract and that contract. Did he? Did he? I mean, are you sitting... Did he sit down and say yes or no to every single line in the contract, like you and I have, on 8 contracts? The only I was the only chairman to ever get all 8 settled in one term,
with years to run on.
None's up yet. Okay,
right.
I mean, we're into the second year and none of them are up yet.
Right.
So he touts his experience, and a lot of his experience. He's saying is, he's a drug guy, right? He's a drug guy. Right. He's a drug guy. He's a drug guy.
And a good cop. And okay. I've known him for a lot of years, and he's worked hard at his craft. But his craft isn't running an agency.
Correct, and there's a huge difference. And I'm not putting him down. I'm not saying he's not able to run the agency.
No, you've said on these airwaves that the county would be well served. Whoever wins, just get out and vote. Get the Republican people out to vote. But please, folks, do your homework.
Correct, because there's going to be growing pains if you go with Mr. Diamond. I want you to understand that. And this is not a slight of him at all. This is how it works. So, one of the things he talks about is his drug experience. And as you know, and I say that ad nauseum, my sister was a sergeant in the Bronx Drug Task Force for over 15 years.
Her weeks were like full terms for somebody working the streets.
There was days that they did 15 no-knock warrants in a day.
Right. Okay? There are years we don't do that many.
In the county.
In
correct.
the county.
When you say did you do how many no-knock warrants did you do? And she goes, not quite 400, but definitely over 350.
Right.
I mean, I want you to understand how many we're talking about, right?
Right.
I mean, it's a lot, okay? When we were, one of the things that we did as when I was chairman of the legislature, when the drug money came in from the settlement, we made sure that the sheriff's office got their fair share.
Correct.
And they used that mostly for equipment. And the way I knew that they needed equipment was through, my sister, right? She said, you need this, you need this, you need this is what you're doing. You need someone to actually watch the count. It was a whole process.
Well, to be clear and to be fair to your sister, I have witnessed your sister drive down the street
Correct.
In this county.
Correct.
And say, there's a drug deal going down right there.
Correct.
And to the untrained eye,
correct,
I saw 2 or 3 people standing on a street corner, just talking on a nice afternoon, and she said, that's a drug dealer.
She said, that's a hand-to-hand right there.
It's a hand-to-hand right there.
Right there. Yeah.
I mean, she's so in tuned to it.
Correct.
That you just can't get that in tuned if you haven't lived her life.
Correct. So when she talks about drugs, I respond. And so, when people talk about the drug, epidemic that happened here, and it was mostly COVID based.
Sure.
That's what really brought it out. What they don't talk about is how quickly, Mike Schiff worked with other agencies and has really peeled that back pretty far. I mean, Mr. DeGata here in Liberty and other agencies have taken great credit for the numbers coming way down.
Right.
Okay? Because it was a problem, and Mike didn't say, okay, I'm going to put my white hat on and roll in and, be the cowboy here. He worked with, all the other agencies in the county, because you can't do this by yourself.
Well, remember, too, that the sheriff surrounded himself with people that knew the streets of Sullivan County. He worked the last part of his career as a trooper in New York City at the Javits Center.
Correct.
And he spent some time as a road trooper here. But he brought in some retired detectives off of other agencies to put his drug task force together. And Pete Ramos, who has really grown up in that environment, working with top-notch detectives, to where he's developed a relationship with Homeland Security and the FBI and done tremendous work. And that's because the sheriff has recognized, I don't have the expertise, but I'm not the one going out executing a warrant. I need to put together a crew that knows what they're doing. Like a general manager in baseball saying, I don't know that I could reach home plate, but I know what it takes to to win a title, and that's to have a good pitching staff.
Correct. And the thing that I'm fascinated by is that Mr. Diamond, and he's more than capable trooper, keeps talking about his time as a detective.
Right.
You're now running for a job as an administrator.
You're not going to be a detective. And if you think you're going out on the street,
you're out of your mind.
You're going to see, first of all, you're going to see the people that have been doing that job not doing that job anymore.
Correct.
And more importantly, who's running the rest of the operation? I mean, you run a restaurant.
Correct.
You were a chef earlier.
Yes.
If you spend your whole time in the kitchen may run real well, but the customers won't be in the dining room.
Correct.
There's the problem.
Correct.
You've got to be a manager.
Correct.
You've got to be able to manage the kitchen, but also manage the front end, manage the ordering, make sure the bathrooms are clean.
You know, I manage 3 businesses, all successful businesses, and it's exactly that. I mean, there's days I pick up a pen. I mean, that's the extent of my job that day.
Right.
But you know, all 3 businesses run well because I manage other people, and that's your job. You're an administrator. You're not a detective. And you know, I mean, you know, Tim Dime was Trooper of the Year. I mean, he has a lot of accolades. Don't get me wrong.
Oh yeah, we've had him here on Ian Sullivan.
Yeah, and
terrific.
You know, he seemed like a nice guy and all that. But I don't think that, you know, what are your administrative skills?
Right. That's what I want to hear about.
That's what I want to hear about. You know, the reason this, in my opinion, this whole primary, and I'm a fan of primaries. I talk about it all the time.
I've always said that consistently.
I mean, I think you can draw out a lot of people. You really see who they are. You get a lot of ideas. And maybe it wasn't your idea, but in the conversation, the winner says, you know, that the other guy said some pretty good stuff,
right?
And I'm going to use that, right? And then you pick their brain a little bit, you know, and you make your agency better. Right?
That's the strength of an adversarial 2-party system.
Correct.
Where the hope is, out of the process, the best of the ideas come to the surface.
Correct. But unfortunately, in the Republican Party, due to the lack of leadership, once again, you know, we're not having that. We're having one side's surrogates bash the current sheriff. Mm-hmm. The current sheriff, I have to tell you, he is showing some serious control.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, you know, I spoke to him the other day, and I said, Mike, I have to tell you, I'm impressed. I learned a lot from this campaign, I have to tell you. Mike has not gotten nasty. He had one retort about the latest, you know, dust up in the jail that the DA knew about, you know, when it happened. Okay, to say that, you know, there needs to be an investigation, all that was done already.
Right.
I mean, you know, we're not investigating it. It was already done. We're going to reinvestigate. Now we're investigating the investigators. I mean, what are we doing here? But my point...
Well, we're reliving old news that was dealt with and put aside.
And put aside.
Put down.
Correct.
Done.
Correct. One of the other things is, you know, like I said, the lack of leadership. I mean, you know, under this current leadership in the Republican Party...
well, now let me stop you there for just a minute. So... what if you talk to just the person on the street? Mm-hmm. They say, we don't like the extremes. We don't like the left side. We don't like the extreme right. We think everybody should come together, and I don't vote for party. I vote for the best person.
Which I think is a great idea.
That's great. And those that would disagree with you would say, if you point to the Democrat leadership, they think the Republican leadership is doing a fine job getting Democrats elected.
Oh, that's what they do.
Sure.
I mean, you know, we had our current chairman of the party,
Greg
Goldstein, came in there on June 26, 2023, replacing Gary Moss, who did a feeble job. This is a guy who didn't even get on the Republican line this time,
right?
Because his petitions were bad. This guy used to be the chair of the party. I mean, he witnessed his own signature on a petition for Mike Schiff. I mean, just to put, and this guy, has the nerve to say, I did a good job. You didn't do a good job.
Well, this is a guy who, as Republican chair, sat in the audience, listened to the Democrat chair, bash the Republican leadership in the legislature, and didn't even bother to stand up to support his team.
Correct. And keep in mind,
that's remarkable to me.
And keep in mind, on an allegation that we wound up finding out was not true at all. Okay?
No surprise.
All right. So one of the things Frank DeMeo had said was, we have a videotape. You can come watch a videotape. You and I went to go look at the videotape.
Right.
They couldn't produce it. We wind up getting the videotape. We look at the videotape. I have an interaction with the young lady. At no point, if you called someone the name they accused me of, you would got a head snap,
of
right?
Course.
Right?
This is somebody you only knew for literally 5 or 6 seconds.
Correct. So no head snap. Then comes in the room, and interacts. I did not interact. I didn't say I did not say a word in that room.
Correct. You had 2 lawyers there.
Correct. I didn't say a word, right? So, Mr. Moss sat there. But anyway, so Greg Goldstein says, I'm here to heal the party and get, Republicans elected in the fall. And once again, his 17 years when people tell you who they are, believe them.
Correct.
Okay? Because he made sure he's never had the majority of the legislature his whole term of now 19 years as the head of the Republican Party.
And he was brought in to ensure that he didn't have the majority of the legislature starting in 24.
Correct. And
that's what he's brought in for.
Tom
Because
Bowes,
they were worried that Gary Moss couldn't do that.
Tom Bowes and other committeemen. I didn't say that, okay? I didn't say that. You could look up Greg Goldstein, WJFF, November 9th, 2023. It's right there. It's laid out clear and simple. To sit there and say that you're a leader, okay, and then go after your own party, okay? This is the guy that, tried to say, we shouldn't endorse anyone, okay?
Right.
Mike Schiff is the face of the Republican Party in this county.
Correct.
Whether you like it or you don't like it, okay? That is who is the face of the Republican Party. They wanted to say, we're going to, we're not going to endorse anyone. That was their plan.
But that wasn't their plan
when
it was Terry Bernardo running against somebody, a carpetbagger.
Correct. So, no, but the reason that they wanted to do that is because they're sneaks.
Correct.
And we know they're sneaks.
Well,
okay?
You're so much nicer than I am. See, I just say it as if they're dishonest.
They are dishonest because what they wanted to do was they wanted to go neutral, right? Say we're not endorsing anyone, even though Mike has been endorsed, 5 times before that for us. And then the Diamond campaign could say, see, they know what we know,
right?
And that's why they endorse us.
Of course.
Okay? And that was a little Dick Coombe trick, okay? So that didn't happen. The party stood up and overwhelmingly, by the way.
Well, the party was stronger than the leadership.
That's what's happening right now.
Right.
People, from what I understand, that the leadership currently doesn't get along with the person they chose to be the commissioner of the BOE.
Which is incredible.
Which is incredible to me.
Yeah.
That's just that just shows you who they are.
You and I have spent a life in sports, and what you've got is a dysfunctional locker room where
Correct.
the leaders have rejected the team.
Correct.
The team feels unrepresented, and the result is mounting losses.
Correct. This is the same people who had a convention 5 days into petitions, okay? Didn't put up the state candidates, the state delegates. We don't get enough signatures, so Sullivan County is not represented in the state, okay? He blames the committee people, but you didn't do any of the things that you were supposed to do.
Well, as soon as you blame the committee,
it's over.
then it's over because you're the head of the committee.
Correct.
So you can't blame down. The buck stops here.
Correct.
We learned that from a Democrat, Harry Truman.
Yes.
Anyway, we got a guest here today.
We do have a guest here today.
And he's sitting patiently.
He's a patient person.
He's a patient person. Well, he becomes impatient when he sees dishonesty in a campaign. And look, folks, campaign on your merits. Tell us why you're better than the other person. Don't tell us why you're less bad to the other person. And then build the less bad on absolute fabrications, depending upon you depend upon the fact that most people will get their news in sound bites and won't drill down.
Correct.
So it's a pleasure to welcome Nate Henderson here to Eye on Sullivan.
Thank you very much. That was a great setup. I like that, by the way. So my name's Nate Henderson. I'm the founder of Sullivan's Legacy. I actually started Sullivan's Legacy. Kind of what we're all talking about here is to try to bring back honor, integrity, and self-service back to politics, especially in Sullivan County. And
Correct.
We kind of dabble depending on where the assembly lines are, where the state lines are, as far as candidates that we get involved with. Like we helped Lou Ingrassia during the last election cycle against Paul McKay. We've helped Mark Molinaro. We try to focus more on like the state and local races and try not to get too much into the bigger races. And that's a perfect segue into why we got involved with Mike Schiff's race. For a lot of people who've been following a lot of the drama on Facebook, we were probably the only organization out there that started fact checking a lot of the accusations that were getting thrown around. And we got a lot deeper into the FBI investigation than I thought we were really even going to get into.
All right, so I want to get into that, but I want our audience to understand who you are, what brings you to Sullivan County, what's your background, so that people can know, because I'm not on Facebook, but it's been told to me in my daily briefings that you're kind of positioned as this crazy radical right-winger. So who is Nate Henderson?
Oh, I mean, that's news to me. I didn't realize I was a crazy radical right-winger. I've actually lived in Sullivan County all my life, or most of my life. I graduated from Tri-Valley. I went to the same high school as Tim Diamond. I'm from Tim Diamond's hometown. I grew up here.
And you probably knew him in high school.
I think he graduated a couple years ahead of me.
Okay.
But either way, we were from the same area. I decided to enlist in the Army during 9/11. 2004, I joined the Army. I've spent.
So you're a 21-year vet of the Army.
Yeah, I've spent 21 years in the Army now. I did 14 years as an enlisted soldier. I went from private all the way to staff sergeant, and
nice.
I made the decision to commission. I received my commission as an officer.
Wow.
All the way through captain. I'm still a member of the Army Reserve, so I still do my normal drilling and my 2-week annual training throughout the year, and all my responsibilities that come along with that. So it was interesting to hear your guys' perspective on how you're reviewing the sheriff's office with the jail, because that's kind of, I have similar reservations about, from my perspective in the Army, because there's a lot of institutional knowledge changes between when you go from being an enlisted soldier and then crossing over, and now you're taking over more of a command position. And definitely having command skill sets are a lot different than the experience you get just from being an enlisted soldier.
Way different. Well, on behalf of our entire audience, we thank you for your service.
Appreciate it.
Because without the selfless dedication of people like yourself, we're a third world nation.
Correct.
So we appreciate that. So let's get into this a little bit. And again, folks, study, learn, vote for the best person. We don't here at Eye on Sullivan look to get personal. We don't accuse people of things that are not supported. But factually, even right here on our show, the Diamond campaign has really built their campaign on these allegations of an FBI investigation and the fact that imminently the sheriff, the undersheriff, are going to be wrapped up in an indictment brought by the FBI. And you drilled down on that probably more than most to say, well, let me look into this. We've had other guests on here to say there's nothing to it. We've had Mr. Diamond on here who said, well, I don't know what there is to it, but we know it's real. We know it's an investigation. So I know that you have really studied it, because you wouldn't come on here to tell us if you didn't. So what have you found out?
Yeah, so the FBI story was probably one of the wildest stories to have to drill down into, because you're essentially put in a position where one person can sort of make this ambiguous statement, and then now the burden of proof is on to you to try to prove something that doesn't exist. I mean, anybody
Proving a negative.
Proving a negative.
Near impossible.
Exactly. It's a logical fallacy called the burden of proof fallacy, or a Kafka trap, where you try to trap your opponent in what's essentially a double bind. So they either have to admit to something that is false, or their denial is proof that it exists.
Yeah. When did you stop beating your wife?
Exactly. That's exactly what it is.
Right.
So my organization and my team, we started seeing a lot of the allegations getting thrown around, particularly around the wintertime, December, November of 2024. A lot of it was on Facebook. A lot of it was just very cryptic. Oh, there's something here, but I can't tell you. Kind of stuff. Then some individuals started stating that they were corroborating witnesses, and we took it a lot more seriously. And the time frame where these allegations were coming from, it was from like 2017 all the way to like 2024.
Oh, 2017. Mr. Diamond wrote a glowing letter about Mr. Schiff in 2021.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I mean, it's on Facebook. I believe Ali Clements put it up. She wrote he wrote a glowing letter of endorsement in 2021 about how great Mike Schiff was.
And that was on behalf of his union.
Yeah,
he was president.
And how great the job he's doing. And so if this happened in 2017 and he's a top flight investigator, with several hundred investigators at his fingertips, he would have known this.
Right. And the more people that I talk to that seem to be loosely connected, there are other people, particularly in Sullivan County, that have been more or less threatened that there was an investigation against them, like it was a weaponized accusation. And I've had people come up to me and be like, oh yeah, so-and-so told me that the FBI was investigating me. I put somebody on a retainer, and 2 years later, I still have no contact from the FBI. So we put that little allegation to the side. We're focusing purely on the allegation that was against Mike Schiff. And so we took the screenshots that we took, all the documentation that we had on Facebook. We sent it to the FBI in a FOIPA request, which is a Freedom of Information Privacy Act request. And they gave us predictably what we thought was going to come back as no records found. And we sent them screenshots with like people's names saying like, I am a witness, or I have spoken to the FBI, or whatever. And they came back with not only no records found, but they also didn't use any of the exceptions, the legal exceptions they would use to be able to withhold information. They just said, hey, we just didn't find anything. So I took that information, I went in front of the legislature, and that's probably where a lot of people started throwing my name around. I got some airtime on that. And conveniently after I came out with those findings, the River Reporter dropped their article. So okay, great. So we picked up the article, read the article, and as you're reading this article, it was very clear that there was no real coherent story or allegation with the FBI story. There's allegations that, I'm just going to name drop them, that Paul Slavic, because it's in public testimony now, Paul Slavic name dropped an FBI agent, and that was supposed to give it credibility. But then you look at who the people that were saying that the story existed against the sheriff, well, they're both disgruntled employees. You have, Jack Harp, who's facing disciplinary hearings, and you have Paul Slavic, who essentially left the department. So you have motive for two individuals that...
To be fair, I think Paul Slavic was forced to leave the department.
Right. I don't know the full conditions as to why he left. I just know that he's not working for the department anymore.
Correct.
And those conditions are known but not disclosable.
Correct.
I'll leave it at that.
Right. So... so you have essentially a reason or a motive to want to burn back the sheriff. But most importantly, when they released their article, they dropped the transcripts of the hearing. And this was the first time the transcripts actually came out. So my team and I, we got a hold of the transcripts. It was like 208 pages or so of testimony from Jack Harb and Paul Slavic. And once you go through the testimony, there are just complete direct denials of an investigation. It's absolutely riddled with hearsay. As to whether an investigation exists or not. Like Jack Harb specifically says that he doesn't have any direct knowledge from the FBI, and that he only learned of the FBI investigation from Chief Muthick and Paul Slavic. And then Paul Slavic takes the stand and on cross-examination admits that, well, the FBI won't really talk to him. So you have an individual who's kind of saying that he's been working with the FBI for 2 years, but the FBI won't work for him, and another individual who has no direct contact or knowledge of an investigation. That's why we went out and we called for a retraction on the piece from the River Reporter. We put all the citations, page and line number on our press release to the reporter. They didn't retract their piece, but we made the decision to submit a second FOIPA request, and this was a very carefully crafted. We never released it. A very carefully crafted FOIPA request that actually used the testimony that Jack Harb and Paul Slavic had. And we knew exactly what to ask for. We asked for all the FD 302s, which are like your interview summaries. We asked for the 209s. We asked for preliminary investigative stuff that, like, if you were just asking questions, you didn't really know, if there was enough to start an investigation. And then we also asked for things like proffer agreements. And for people who don't know what a proffer agreement is, those are like
Mike does.
Well, Mike obviously does, but for the audience that doesn't know.
I do not.
So a proffer agreement is an example of like a corroborating liability, right? So you're agreeing to work with the FBI, and they're also agreeing that they're not going to like prosecute you or come after you. It's a formal agreement between the two. So we asked for all of that. But we specifically put in this FOIPA request that we were looking to corroborate the testimony of Paul Slavic, who testified in open hearings that he was a corroborating witness to the FBI.
Which would be required of someone who's claiming whistleblower status.
Right.
Because if you haven't been a whistleblower, then you don't get whistleblower status. You don't get treated as a whistleblower.
Right.
So you would have to have disclosed information to someone in order to get that status.
Correct. And so now you have, and we put that in there specifically because we wanted to sort of challenge to see if the FBI would even really protect their own case. Because Tim is right in the sense where, sure, the FBI is not going to confirm or deny an investigation, but they absolutely would protect their investigation. So now you have two instances where Paul Slavic was name dropped to the FBI, stating that he was a corroborating witness, and on both instances, the FBI did nothing. And we have. It's now been 3 months. We submitted that FOIPA in February. I was able to still get the transcripts from the county completely unredacted, unsealed. They were not challenged by the FBI. There's been no action to stop Tim Diamond from campaigning on the FBI investigation. I mean, he was sending mailers as recent as June saying that there was an investigation in the sheriff's department.
What are you talking? I got one the other day.
On Friday.
Right. Yeah, I got one this morning too. But so in this particular case, not only is there overwhelming evidence in the transcripts that there was no investigation, but the FBI won't even protect their own investigation from Tim Diamond. And in my opinion, it looks like Tim Diamond's the only one that's allowed to talk with any kind of certainty whether it exists or not. And if you question it, it's like, well, wait. The FBI is not going to confirm anything. Well, so then how do you know?
Well, one of the exceptions to the FOIA statute is that there's it's material involved in an ongoing criminal investigation.
Right.
So that would be how they would respond to you.
Right. And to dive into the actual legal statute, I think it's 5 U.S.C. 552. There's a series of 5 or 7 exceptions, and they have stuff like if they're a corroborating witness, you can protect it if it's classified information, if it's an ongoing investigation. They have protections for privacy, like if your investigation would reasonably leak someone's personal information, they could withhold that. They have every reason to file an exemption to protect their information. And the FBI not only chose not to do that, wouldn't even move to stop Mike Schiff's principal opponent from campaigning on it.
Yeah. I mean, the only conclusion there is that there's no there there.
So I don't know this for a fact, but I would imagine any police agency has interaction with the FBI over cases, over evidence.
Well, there's task forces that the FBI is involved with, mostly in the narcotics and the organized crime area. But I mean, Jake Gore, who was here, he served on that. I believe Tim may have served on that at one time, or certainly they crossed paths at one time.
In fact, Jake Gore once arrested one of my waitresses.
There you go.
That's true.
And he married one of my secretaries. So there you go.
All happy endings.
All happy endings.
But my point is, when you say that the FBI was in contact with the sheriff's department, I mean, that's kind of a misnomer there, because there's going to be contact, because there's cases that you're working on that it's constant. I mean, to say, oh, I spoke to, I'm making up a name now, FBI agent Jeffries, because they were inquiring about a case. And do you have this prisoner in your prison? And do who was the arresting officer, and this, that, and the other thing. And these are things that happen on a pretty routine basis.
There's another whole dimension to this that should be disconcerting to the voters in Sullivan County. And that is that particularly the district attorney and the sheriff, as county employees, are sworn to defend the Constitution of the United States and the state of New York, as you are as an officer. And central to that is protecting the presumption of innocence. So you're talking about an investigation, using it to infer guilt when you're seeking an office whose principal job is to protect the presumption of innocence. And that's a real concern. If there's an indictment, okay, there's still a presumption of innocence, but you have something. But you're shadowboxing. You're asking someone to prove a negative, which is near impossible.
Now, keep in mind, he's been talking about this for 5 months.
Correct.
Okay, we're down to 7 days.
Correct.
Okay. Apparently there's about 1,000 and change absentees in. I think about 2,100 went out. More than half of them are back in. We have about 250 people have voted already in early voting. So, the election's well on the way right now.
Right.
And we still don't have anything. And we're telling me that this went back to 2017.
Correct.
And now we're here 8 years later. And go ahead.
Here's the thing: is that I think, and I take more of a black-pilled approach about it. My own personal opinion. Disclaimer: there's a lot of litigious people out there. My personal opinion is that it's a little bit more insidious than that. I think that the whole campaign is just it's lived in this level of ambiguity, right? He doesn't need to prove that it exists. He just needs to plant the seed of doubt in your mind that, well, maybe it does.
Well, but that seems to be central to the way politics is functioning now. It's part of the rules for radicals.
Correct.
It absolutely is. It's rule number 5: freeze your opponent, right?
Correct.
And
I loved it.
I would take it a step further even and say that I actually think that Tim Diamond knows that this isn't a real investigation, because he went in front of the legislature.
That's a statement.
Well, he went in front of the legislature, and it's on record. You can see it. And he stated that he was present and heard the testimony that Jack Harb and Paul Slavic gave. So he heard Jack Harb say, I've never spoken to the FBI. I have no direct knowledge of the FBI. He heard Paul Slavic say the FBI won't talk to them, but he still pushed it. And again, I'm speculating. If you watch from when we dropped our FOIPA request in February, it was largely quiet about the FBI investigation until May, when it got revived. That's why we didn't talk much about it ourselves. We kind of just left it as well, maybe it's a dead issue. And then it came back up again. And I think it's because it's the intent of just planting that seed of doubt to scare voters into thinking, well, maybe there is something there. Maybe I should vote for somebody else.
Well, this started in 2017. I was the county attorney until December 31st, 2023. I understand that the target of an investigation generally is the last person that they talk to. I get that. I've been part of enough investigations to know that. But in those from 2017, I became the county attorney in 2020 and stayed there till end of 2023. We never had communication from anyone seeking to speak to employees of Sullivan County. They don't have to come through us. Never did we have a communication seeking to interview any of our employees. Now, if there's this rampant corruption that would get on the radar of the FBI, I can guarantee you that they would have been wanting to speak not only to sheriff's detectives, but they would have wanted to speak to other people in the county manager, the deputy county manager, the people in purchasing. They would want to get a full picture. I know how these investigations go. They're okay, a couple of deputies or a couple of detectives may have reached out to their friends to say, hey, you know what's going on, and maybe there is an investigation. But as of right now, it's sealed. They're not commenting on it, and you can speculate that anything is happening at any time to any person. But is that how we want to pick our leaders, by having somebody say, hey, there's an investigation into this person? And that's happening in other places in this county. In the town of Highland, we have a town clerk who's not been permitted to work since February the 26th.
Whoa, hold on. That's not true, because the supervisor told the town attorney that she had a computer.
Correct.
And that she was working.
Right. So from February 26th, the town attorney has maintained all along that they took her computer away. They said, and they continue to say, that there's an ongoing investigation. The district attorney, to his credit in this county, has said, I'm not aware of anything, and I can assure you that if an elected official in this county was being investigated by the New York State Police or the Secret Service or anybody else.
Hold on. The state police have no blotter.
None.
Nothing. Say, we don't know what you're talking about.
In fact, when the state police were asked to confiscate this computer,
they were like, what?
Their response was, for what?
Correct.
You know, we can't look in it without a search warrant.
Correct.
So what are we going to do with it? And it was turned over to an accounting firm who the town spent $33,000 to find out that at best there was more money deposited than taken in, so clearly there was a bookkeeping error.
Hold on. Nancy Buck, who we all love and respect,
the treasurer
of this county, has 2 letters that went to the current supervisor,
right,
saying that your balance is 0.
Right.
Okay. In 2 separate years.
Not his fund balance. In other words, it's his books are clean.
Correct. As far as the county goes, with the collection of taxes in that town, they're all set.
So the allegations, by a surrogate of the person running against this person, the person running against the clerk happens to be a sitting council person, town board member in Highland. One of her surrogates got up and said, when are we going to see this person arrested?
Surrogate. It's her husband.
It's her husband.
Okay.
It's her husband.
Let's get this straight.
When are we going to see this person arrested for stealing $4.2 million on a $2 million operating budget? There is no possible way that someone in office for 4 years, that's $500,000, that's 25% of the operating budget, she would have to have taken every year.
Oh, no, I got something better for you. So then that person who's a sitting council person going against the current town clerk,
right,
says, and there's piles of cash in the safe.
Correct.
Okay. I don't want her in charge of anything of mine, because that means that you're in possession of it.
Right.
Okay? There's no stealing if it's in the town safe. I hate to be the one to break this to you.
Well, there's also no stealing if you've deposited more money than you took in.
Correct.
That makes her a philanthropist.
Correct.
So piles of money in the safe, maybe. Let's get Geraldo and let's open it up.
Whoa.
I mean, here's a situation where they have brought in the state police. Instead of the state police out making our streets safe, they've politicized them to get involved in weaponizing a political campaign.
Now, just so you know, they've just stood there. That's all they've done.
That's all they've done. No issues with the state police.
Yeah, no, they've done
Captain Kroger does a great job with
he does a great
people.
Job. You want to talk about the right guy for the job at the right time, it's that guy.
Captain Kroger does a terrific job.
Terrific job.
But what happens is the supervisor calls them. They respond, as is their duty. Interestingly enough, they don't call the sheriff, who has a contract to provide services to the town of Highland. They call the state police.
Correct.
And the state police say, what are we doing here?
Exactly.
I mean, we have a search warrant. We'll take the computer and look for what? What are we looking for? Well, something wrong. What do you mean? We need a search warrant.
I want you to know something real fast about this whole episode down in Highland. We're going to get back to Nate in a second here. But it all started when the clerk, who's an elected official on her own.
Correct.
Okay, I understand that. You are not to be managed by the supervisor. Okay?
That's correct.
Let's get that straight. Okay, you are your own entity. Refused to change the minutes of previous meetings. And then all of a sudden, when she refused, the deluge of, she's a bad person, she's stealing, blah, blah, blah. That's when the deluge started. I mean, you could follow the timeline to the day.
And when we asked the town attorney to please tell us why this person cannot work, because let's face it, folks, you're the town clerk and you don't have a computer in 2025, means you can't look up any records, you can't take money, you can't do anything.
You can't do a marriage license, you can't do a fishing license, you can't do anything.
Right.
Okay? I mean, so you're sitting there like, why am I even here? And so they're trying to hamstring her.
Of
so
course.
Then they can turn around and say, see, she didn't do her job for 6 months.
Correct.
But I didn't have a computer and you guys restricted me.
Well, and they have said when her deputy, who by the way reports to her, not the town board,
go ahead.
When her deputy is off, she should stay home and close the office. So to the hardworking people of the town of Highland, be careful about taking a day off to go pay your taxes or whatever, because the office may not be open if the deputy is off that day or she calls in sick, because the town clerk, when you show up, even if she's there, can't do anything.
So at the last meeting was the first time that the town attorney realized that the town supervisor had lied to him for 5 months.
Right.
And finally figured out that the town clerk doesn't have a computer. But here's my question about the town attorney.
Mm-hmm.
You set a table, an 8-foot long table.
Right.
Right? Now, Sue sits at the other side of that table.
Okay.
Right? So you're 12 feet away from the person.
Right.
Okay. At what point, and now March went by, April went by, May went by, June went by.
Right.
At what point, when you're you're 12 feet away from the person, do you say, hey, Sue, you have that computer, right? And everything's going good, right?
Well, when you're 12 foot away from her, you're 10 foot away from her office.
Correct.
And you stood in her office one day and watched you asked the police to have the deputy download confidential information
Correct.
that they wanted to turn over to Bonadio, and made the statement that, well, we're elected officials also. Yeah, but you're not the elected clerk.
Correct.
You're not the elected clerk. And so I can report.
Oh, by the way, they've also put cameras in her office.
In her office.
That go to the supervisor's personal device.
He's watching things carefully. So I can report that yesterday they gave her a laptop.
Yes.
So that's very nice. We're seeing some progress. But it has no software.
Zero software.
It has no software.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
she still can't do anything. Man, I don't know. Maybe it has Microsoft Office. She could write a letter, but she can't.
She can play. You could give her an abacus and a deck of cards, and she could sit there and count things up and play solitaire.
Now
And
you know
that's
what?
basically
We
what
worked
you
with
did.
Lauren Green for years.
Great guy.
And I went to him with some pretty complex issues, and he was able to get on it in an instant. I ask you, Lauren, if you're out there, you can send us an email. Why does it take 4.5 months to get a computer and set it up as a terminal into the town has to have a server?
You would think.
You would think. So the other issue I want to get to, and we're going to get back to Nate, is in my Facebook briefing this morning.
Okay.
From my wife, who gives
Yeah.
it to me every morning.
Yeah.
Gives me a briefing, folks. Keep your minds out of the gutter.
All right.
I learned today that the mayor of the Village of Liberty, who just presided over a 17+% tax increase.
I'm sorry. Does it matter if it's 0.2 or 0.9?
No, it doesn't matter.
Once you're in the 17 range.
When you're in the 17 range, everything else is just icing on the cake.
And again, I own 4 homes in the town of Bethel.
Right.
And pay less on my homes than you pay in the Village of Liberty.
That is correct. That is correct. And so she has blamed. This is a person that has been, I'm a Dolphin fan, and we've had the same general manager through most of the 25 years without a playoff win.
Correct.
So analogizing, this is the person who has been on the town board or the mayor for much of the last 20 years.
Correct.
Okay? So, as you know and I know, if you get to a point of a 17 point whatever percent tax increase, it's because of mismanagement over a very long period of time. It doesn't happen in 1 year.
It does not.
So now, yesterday she comes out with a statement endorsed by the town supervisor in Liberty, Mr. DeMeo, who says that the 17.9% tax increase is the responsibility of the county legislature because they won't share sales tax.
Okay. And you know,
we dealt with this in the county.
Okay. Know what else they don't share? They don't share the cost of your bridges. They don't share the cost of your workers' comp. They don't share the cost of the
chargebacks.
The chargebacks from colleges. And there's about 24 other items that they don't share with you. Because let me tell you right now, this argument is so old and so weak. If the county, unlike other counties, turned around and charged the townships and villages what they're supposed to make it fair, you would bankrupt most of these villages. Okay.
Oh, no question.
Okay, so I going back to Tom Bowes, he speaks about this all the time, and I always say there's another avenue to share revenue. Okay, I believe that there are other avenues.
Well, you came to the to the town supervisors with a plan
Correct.
that would have generated considerable amount of revenue
Correct.
and addressed a major issue with the Airbnb situation.
Correct, and I was shot down cold. Okay.
We weren't invited back to a second meeting.
We were not invited back to a second meeting. So, and looking back, 4 years later, I was 100% correct. But the issue is this, is that they always say, we're one of 6 counties that don't share. Okay, just so we're clear. In the state of New York, if you do not have a city in your county, you do not have to. You're not obligated to share.
Right.
It's number one.
That's cities get those advantages.
Correct. Number 2, the one county that does not have a city and shares is Putnam County.
Relatively wealthy county.
It is the 12th wealthiest county, not in the state of New York, in the country. Okay.
Right.
They need they need your money like they need a hole in the head. Okay.
Correct.
They are doing well. Trust me. And again,
and Putnam really doesn't even have a major shopping area. They don't have a Middletown type of a place.
No.
Or
I mean, they have Brewster, Carmel, places
they have
like that.
They have lots of quaint towns and
Correct.
villages.
Well, the one thing that they do have is that they are an MTA county.
Yeah.
Okay. And all the MTA counties, I mean, you could see the growth of Orange County.
Sure.
When they became an MTA county back in the 80s, you could see the growth of that.
Particularly Warwick down, where they were 10 minutes from a train and
Correct.
easy.
Correct. Then you're open to New York City jobs, and that changes, the ball game.
Changes the whole ball game.
Correct. Because if you're traveling an hour and 10 minutes to work, you don't care what direction you're going in. You really don't.
Correct.
Okay. Then you can be a sanitation worker. You could be a teacher. There's a lot of jobs you're open to. But my point being is, you knew the rules of the game.
Right.
Before you entered into the game.
Right.
If you want to share sales tax, and again, I do believe that the villages should get something, and I do believe that the town should get something. Okay, but sales tax is not the answer. It is not I understand that that's where most of the sales tax is generated, but you have to look at the whole picture.
Well, it's where all the sales tax is generated in some town or village.
Correct.
But all of the expense of running the county also comes from some town or village.
Correct.
Every inmate in the jail comes from a town or village.
Correct.
Every piece of blacktop that someone drives over in every town and village, if it's a county road, comes from the county.
You cannot get to any town in this county without going on a county road.
Right. Or the bridges. The county took those back even if they're on a town road.
How about the garbage issue?
And the garbage issue.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean,
and that was another issue that she raised for our current legislature, is that the county increased the cost of tipping by 25%.
Well, because this current legislature robbed the people of Sullivan.
And the mayor was correct on that. It was 100%. An unreasonable raise.
I don't agree with Joan on a lot of things,
right,
but I agree with her on that. Okay, they sure raised it by $11, which was their increase, but they went way overboard and they got a little greedy. And now you have people. Now you have a problem with flow control. Now you have people going outside, and they're gonna find out real fast that you can't stop them.
Well, and we've learned, and we've passed the information on here at Ion Sullivan to our audience, that sales tax has now surpassed property taxes as the principal source of revenue for this county.
Correct.
So that's great management by people like Nancy Buck and Josh Potosik and Rob Doherty and rest in peace Mike Brooks and George Conklin have done a great job of managing that over time. So the question now is, that's not gravy slush fund money for the county.
It is not.
That's the main. That's now the main source of revenue. So if the county starts to share that, then the whole develops in the county, and everybody else's taxes have got to be raised to support the county, or the towns and villages need to take some of the expense.
Okay, so this is what it comes down to. It's just a transfer of money, okay? That's all it's going to be. You have 15 townships and I believe 8 or 9 villages, okay? All you're doing is transferring the money. You take a fine village like Jeffersonville.
Right.
They have major water infrastructure issues.
As does Liberty.
Okay.
But has Liberty for over 10 years.
Okay. Most of the sales tax that's generated in the town of Calhoun is generated in the village of Liberty, village of Jeffersonville.
Sure.
Okay. I don't see Tom sharing any money with Bill.
No, I don't.
He's not like, hey, Bill, you know what? We're doing so well in this town. We're going to write you a check to fix your water infrastructure.
Right.
I don't see that happening.
That's not happening.
That's not happening.
That's not happening.
So, we're going to be fair. Let's be fair about the whole thing. But let's get back to the sheriff's race.
Right.
So you started the Sullivan legacy. Mm-hmm. You obviously, are passionate about, getting the truth out there, right? So, like me, you've been banned from the major platforms in the county, like Post and.
Well, I did get unbanned from the Sullivan County Post.
You did?
Yeah. That's where a lot of my fan base is coming from right now. A lot of the usual DMers like to come over and talk smack in my DMs. They find me on the Sullivan County Post.
But by the way, I got kicked off all of them with a spectacular meme. Spectacular meme. I might put it up again tonight just so everyone understands how spectacular that meme was, okay?
Well, I mean, I could say it has been beneficial to me to be unbanned, Yeah, that's all I'm going to say about being banned from the Sullivan County Post. But that's like I said, it's where a lot of the attention comes from. That is kind of the market.
So I read that article in the Democrat. They had, I believe, last week. I've watched Tim's interviews on this very station on Bold Gold, and I believe he's going to be on WJFF. At no point have I seen him put forward his platform.
Well, I will correct. Technically, he did come out with a platform 11 days before Election Day. So I did see the Democrat did run, a little blurb between the two candidates, and at the very end there was like this small little point for Tim. But from a political lens, especially when you're running a campaign, to develop a platform or any kind of a pillar of your campaign 11 days before an election is a horrific move.
Well, you do that when you don't want give people an opportunity to really drill down on it.
Well, I've explained it too, is that challenging an incumbent, and mind you, this is coming from my experience working on different campaigns. Challenging an incumbent is very difficult, especially a long incumbent like Mike Schiff, who has an actual track record. You can track the crime stats, you can see what he's done. So unless your track is essentially you either identify and come up with a platform of changes that you want to have happen in the sheriff's department, or you go after the person personally. And I think that we've seen the direction that it's gone from. That when the campaign started, and this is just what I'm espousing as our beliefs when we were vetting the two candidates between who we were going to support. From the very beginning, it was kind of clear to us that it was a lot of personal attacks, a lot of innuendos. We had a very difficult time actually figuring out what Tim's actual plan was, what did he actually want to do, whereas we could easily vet, what Mike was going to do. So the decision wasn't that difficult, and we did try to stay somewhat neutral because we wanted to see how it was going to play out throughout most of the election season until May, and May is when I think you guys saw how dirty and how it kicked up.
Well, it's unfortunate the direction it went.
I think most people, and from people who I talk to, most people tend to have an understanding that this is one of the dirtiest races in recent Sullivan County history.
So just to give a history real fast, generally speaking, in sheriff's races, they're pretty ugly, okay? Because you have two, apex predators, right? going at each other, okay? And someone has to topple the other one. Usually, not like what happened last year in Orange County where you had a sheriff retire and then you had two people go at it. You have someone that's been in office for 20 years and wants to be in office for 24 years. So now you got to take that person out, and how do you do that, right? And there's strategies to do so. This is not the strategy I would have chose, by the way.
It's a very, in my opinion, in my experience, it's a very risky strategy. Because there's a real risk of turning off and alienating voters from the constant, what I call slander.
Well, I think the risk is even bigger than that. I think the risk for that kind of office, legislature, town boards, even school boards, you have a little bit more latitude. When you're hiring somebody who they want to be in a job that has to be above politics,
correct?
That has to be that their credibility means everything, and they surround themselves with people that spew information that is not completely truthful and accurate, you run the risk of destroying your political career. You're shooting the horse in the starting gate. You may be young, you may have aspirations, and you then tattoo yourself with that which your surrogates are espousing on your behalf.
Correct. See, and I talked about this 2 shows ago. When I ran against Scott Samuelson, I knew Scott for 30 years. Okay, I knew him a long time. I was drinking the Brad Stand when I was 19 years old. So when I ran for office, I was 50 years old the first time. So I had met with Scott, and we agreed that we wouldn't have those conversations. We wouldn't get dirty with each other or anything like that. And we didn't. I mean, it was his record. We talked about, some issues that I had with the compression station down in Highland.
Right.
That we got the best deal you could possibly get on.
Because of your leadership.
Because I negotiated the deal.
You sat in the conference room.
I was like, we're not doing that. The whole goal there was to save the school, right?
The school would have been done.
Would have been done. If they did a clawback in that situation, the school would have been over. And I felt that, my wife was on a school board for over a decade, and she preached small schools all the time to me. Monticello's bigger than all the other schools combined in the county. And she had preached that to me all the time. I went to a relatively small Catholic school in the city. So, I had that in my mind, and we negotiated a deal. There was no clawbacks, and we got a 5-year deal out of it, where normally they give 3-year deals out of it. So it was a good deal for
with no
us.
clawback.
With no clawback.
So going forward.
Correct. So that was my reference point to look at this campaign. Okay, and this is why people hate primaries. Okay, and again, I'm a fan of primaries because I think a lot of conversation can come about. I thought the Lou and Camille, the Lou and Grassi and the Camille O'Brien was a good primary. I thought that people had, they sat in this very studio, if I'm not mistaken, and they had a good conversation. And they moved. I thought they moved the ball forward as a party. This is not moving the ball forward as a party.
No, I don't think so at all. I think that especially in this, like Sullivan County in particular, is like Sullivan County hates dirty politics to begin with. And,
I agree.
And the tactic, I think, is easily misplaced. I think it was a bad calculated move. I mean, the easy solution would just be like, hey, what are the criticisms with the sheriff's department? What can I do to implement better changes? And instead, we went with the FBI story.
The funny thing about it, so I was chairman of the legislature, and I negotiated both of their contracts. And then we made a lot of changes to how it operates also. When the drug money came in, we fought hard, the legislature fought hard to get Mike's, the sheriff's department's slice of their pie, other than other money, right? The money that was already mandated for them, we cut out another piece of the pie for them, and they used it wisely. And I've had a lot of disagreements with Mike Schiff on how some things are run. Not overall, just some things are run. I have some issues with some things, but I don't care what organization you have. I mean, you're looking at several hundred people in an organization, a lot of moving parts. I may not agree with this, but I'm not the one elected to the office, okay? And if you want to have a debate about that, and if you want to talk about modern policing and other things in those departments. I mean, it goes over most people's heads, though, unfortunately, because most people do not understand policing. Mm-hmm. They really just don't understand it. And I think Tim would have had a hard time getting that into people's heads on why you do something this way and why the way it's currently being done is wrong and this is the right way to do it. Right. But I think he should have tried that, right?
It's definitely a skill to be able to take something that you're expertly knowledgeable about on, like, say, for example, policing. In my case, is like the military. I struggle with this myself, trying to explain things that I've done or things that I know about in the military and try to like break it down to like somebody who would be an average voter.
Well, if you don't break it down, then it's meaningless, because once you're above people's understanding level, I mean, anyone that's done some teaching knows you've lost them.
And that is why most, going back to the sports reference, that's why most great athletes are not good coaches.
No way.
Because
Absolutely.
they have a totally different view of how things are done.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's the person who's a mediocre player that had to do more and had to, work within a team system. I mean, you take a guy like a Bill Parcells and a Bill Belichick, right? I mean, they're both great coaches, but they were mediocre.
Division III football player.
Yeah, they were mediocre at best, right? On both of them.
Yeah, Don Mattingly. I mean, you got a lot of Hall of Famers that aren't good coaches, but Don Mattingly, of course, is not a Hall of Famer. So he did a good job.
But if he wasn't a Yankee, he'd be a Hall of Famer.
That's true.
But anyway, my point being is that, so those guys aren't, but, would you want Lawrence Taylor as your coach? No, because he can't explain what he does. Mm-hmm. He can't break it down. I mean,
and people don't have its abilities. They can say, get to the quarterback, and they're like, yeah, okay.
I saw a clip on him, just to digress for a second, where he was playing golf in Rockland County one day, and he lived in Jersey, and it was a Monday, and he's driving home, right? He's like, oh, something's going on at the...
Spook Rock Golf Course is that?
Yeah, and he's like, oh, there's something going on at the stadium. Maybe it's a concert. I'll go catch a concert, right? So he pulls up, and they're like, you got to get in the game. We're playing tonight? So he goes and he gets dressed. There's like 2 plays left in the first quarter, and Bill sits him for the rest of the quarter.
Right.
And then he's like, you son of a gun, you got to get in there and, all
right, discipline done.
Yeah, show everyone why I'm putting you back in there. And trust me, he lives up to, being the greatest linebacker of all.
Again, we can go on with this conversation, I think, for several hours, but we have again come to the end of our hour. Nate, we want to thank you for the good work that you're doing, and we thank you for coming on Ion Sullivan and sharing the information, and we invite anyone who has an opposing view is welcome to contact us and say, we want to come on.
Now, your site continues after this campaign, correct?
Yeah, so Sullivan's Legacy is an enduring organization. We're a registered independent expenditure committee, so once this fight's over, we prep for the next fight and we get ready for the next election cycle.
Correct.
And in full transparency, anybody who wants to see the documents, we've made them public for everybody. You can go to our website, sullivanslegacy.com/FBI. You can see all the transcripts, you can see the FOIPA letters, you can see our requests, our emails, and everything.
Folks, our objective here at Ion Sullivan is to turn the light on and let you know what the facts are. We invite people from both sides of the aisle to come on here. We don't endorse any candidates, but we want to try to rid the county of the dirty dishonesty that permeates politics today. That's what we're trying to do. So, folks, we invite you to subscribe. The numbers are going up, and when you listen to us or you watch us on YouTube, subscribe and drop us a comment. If you have something to say, if you think that we're wrong, if you think we're overly partisan, if you think that we're not reporting on things completely, drop us a comment. On YouTube, right now, folks, if you're watching us on YouTube right now, put down the iced tea, put down the hot dog, put down the chips.
Put down the TV remote.
Put down the TV remote. Yeah, you're not changing the channel here because you probably haven't watched all of the episodes of Ion Sullivan yet. Please, right now, be sure to
smash
that like button. That helps us deliver content to you. And if you want to drop us a line, ionsullivan@gmail.com is our site, our email address, and you can drop us a line. So we don't ban people.
We do not.
Whatever your comments are, we will leave them up there for everyone to see. We want you to subscribe. We want you to get information from here and other sites. And we thank you once again for joining us for this episode of Eye on Sullivan. So, on behalf of the chairman, Rob Doherty.
Just real fast.
Yeah.
You need to make informed decisions. And after this primary is over, the Republican Party needs to come back together and move forward as one unit. We cannot be separated by this primary. We have to come together. Whoever the victor is, that is going to be our sheriff for the next 4 years, and we need to get behind that person and support that person the best we can.
100%. That's what we want to do. And we want Republican committee to advocate Republican candidates, and that brand has to mean something.
I agree.
That brand has to mean something. You cannot dress up a liberal and call them a Republican for political purposes. And I think that's been the problem with some of the Republican leadership, is they've wanted to parade out liberals as Republicans for whatever reason. Nate, once again, thanks for taking the time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your service to this nation. And folks, thank you again for tuning in and listening and watching this episode of Eye on Sullivan. We'll be back next week with another edition of Eye on Sullivan. Get out there, Republicans, and vote, vote, vote.